map makers, and welcome to my map making tutorial. My name is Jessica Khoury. I'm the author of Origin and Vitro, and I am a cartography hobbyist, you might say. I'm not a professional, and I am not a graphic artist expert or Photoshop wizard, so you'll have to take this with a grain of salt and hopefully pick up a few things. This is for people who are familiar with computers and possibly even Photoshop or programs like it. And I'm going to try to go slowly though, so that if you have a very limited grasp of Photoshop and programs like it, then you'll be able to follow along, hopefully. So first things first, these are some of the maps that I've made, and this is kind of what we're going to be going for, the sort of look that my tutorial will produce. Very basic. As you can see, these maps are good for reference for yourself, and you know, if you work long and hard enough on making them look good, they can also be produced with a book or story that they go along with. So these are some of my maps that I've done over the years for different projects and just for fun. Sometimes I make maps for no reason at all, but they end up inspiring stories from just the places that come out of it. So it can be a fun thing to do as a hobby, to go with a book, whatever you're using it for. I hope that you'll find this helpful. So let's get started. I am using Adobe Photoshop for this tutorial. Now if you don't have Photoshop, then what you can do is go onto their website, and you can get it for a 30-day free trial with Creative Cloud or one of their other sets, and that lets you learn the basics of the program. You can probably make a few maps in that time, and you can decide to purchase it later on, or if you like, there are a lot of alternative programs that might be cheaper or work better with your budget, but they will all work similarly to Photoshop, so hopefully this tutorial will work no matter which program you're using, though I would not recommend using Microsoft Paint. It just doesn't have the capacity for this kind of thing. Alright, another thing I would recommend having is a graphics tablet. I'm using a Wacom Bamboo tablet, and the tablets range anywhere from $20 to a couple $100, so there's usually something for everybody's price range. And I mean, if you're particularly sadistic, I suppose you can use a mouse, but it's pretty tough, so I would recommend looking into one of these tablets, especially if you like to do art and are looking into doing more graphic artwork. Then they are invaluable and absolutely essential to the graphic artist. So, alright, map making. The first thing we're going to do is choose our canvas size. So, opening up a new file here, and the size of your canvas depends on a couple different things. You do want it to be large enough that you can get into do details, and you can enlarge your image without losing the quality of it. So you don't want to go too small, but you also don't want to go too big, because the bigger you get, the harder and longer it's going to take for the computer to save it and complete some of the actions that we're going to be doing. For now, I'm just going to start with a basic 8.5 by 11 normal printer paper kind of size. Ideally you would go bigger though, but so that the tutorial will not take forever to save and load and things like that, I'm going to keep it about this size for now. We're going to name it Mappy. Okay. And there's our image, our basic starting point. Zoom in a little bit. Okay. Now the first thing we're going to do, every map is made up of two elements, water and land. If you're making a landlocked country, you can skip this first step. But the first thing we're going to do is put down that water, that ocean part. And we're going to do that on a new layer. As you can see down here in this tab, we start with our background. We don't want to draw on the background because that makes us run into trouble later if we have to go back and make any changes to it. So we're going to open a new layer. We're going to call it Ocean, because that's a very inventive name. And grab our paint bucket, a nice happy shade of blue, and we're going to color in the image. It's going to take a little bit, because it is still a good sized image. Not great. It can be a lot bigger, and I would recommend a lot bigger when you make your map. Alright, ocean. Yay! That was easy, wasn't it? Okay, congratulations, you made it on the first step of your map making journey. We can make it look prettier later with textures, make it look like water, old parchment, what have you, but for now we're just going to leave it like this. And then we're going to move on to the next step, which is land, which is my favorite part, because it starts looking like a map almost immediately. New layer. Land ho. Okay, so here's the land. And for this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a nice, gentle sepia tone. And I'm going to start with a relatively large, hard brush size. Because right now I'm just putting down a basic shape of the land. I'm not getting too detailed just yet. So I'm just going to start coloring it in. Keeping the color pretty light for now, but that is so easy to change later, so don't worry about that just yet. You don't have to get the colors just right. And it's so easy to come in later and to change to sepia tone, black and white map, whatever you want to do. So, let's say I'm going to work on this sort of island shape. Let's say I'm working on a story that's about pirates or something. They're on this island. Now, as you can see, I'm starting with a very nebulous, blobby amoeba of a continent. And that's okay. We're going to shape it up pretty quickly. Now, it is good to keep in mind the basic flow of the land. It does have to make sense if it's going to look legitimate. And I'll go over a little bit of that in later tutorials, but I want you to keep in mind that mountains, islands, rivers, bays, they all interact with each other. You can't just plot these things wherever you want. They have to kind of make sense. And the best way that you can learn how land works and how different land features affect others is to look at other maps. I like to get big atlases out and just study coastlines, study mountains, study rivers. Where do they happen? How do they interact with each other? And just to get a feel of the natural world in order to make your fantasy world look legitimate and viable. So I'm just putting out all kinds of random stuff. Not necessarily all of these are going to stay in this shape, but I am trying to just get a feel of what it's going to look like. Okay, so there's this sort of basic, very, very simple sort of template we're going to start with. Now, something I like to do early on, and this is something you do later, now, whatever you want to do, is to make it stand out a little bit and give it a sort of land feel. So come down here to your layer where it says Land O and just double click or right click, and you'll get this little box here, and this is your layer style. And this is like the quick and easy way to make anything look good, basically, especially if you are not particularly adept at Photoshop or these other programs like me. I am not super familiar with them. I'm all sort of self-taught. So this is a quick way to make anything look kind of cool. So I'm going to bevel emboss this layer, which kind of gives it a three-dimensional effect, you know, like it's rising up out of the water. And soften it a little bit. So, yeah, that looks good. Right about there. Okay. And we're going to come back to this later and make it look even better. But for now, you can add a stroke to give it a sort of outline look. That's going to help me decide that it is, in fact, land. The next step to making this look like a realistic continent, or island, is to shapen up these coastlines. Now, if you look at a map, generally speaking, coastlines are not this smooth. They're jagged, and they've got all kinds of interesting features. And the more features you add to your map, the more stories are going to come out of it. And we'll talk about that more in some of the later tutorials as we start getting into the details of making your map and your world come to life. I like to use the eraser for the coastlines because it helps to give a little more natural look, because it's kind of like, coastlines are formed by the water eroding them away, and so that's kind of how I see this. You're using your eraser to erode these coastlines down, whittle them down to a more natural look. So I'm just going to start by tracing the outline here, and I'm going to just dip in some places. I'm going to leave other places hanging out, and as you can see, as I do this, islands start to appear in some places. Peninsulas, isthmuses, I can't really say that word. But all these really cool features that sometimes can inspire stories just by seeing how they play out. So, as you can see, it's already starting to look a little bit more like a coastline. And it's starting to take on a little bit more character. And I really like how this ends up playing out in just coming up with some sort of spontaneous shapes that you wouldn't normally use. Now, it's really our brains tend to think in patterns and in straight lines, and when we're drawing our maps, we want to avoid that. We want to avoid repetitive patterns. We want to avoid straight lines. We want to avoid anything looking symmetrical, unless the world you're creating is purposely designed to be that way. Generally speaking, you're going to want to keep it spontaneous. Alright, so I have worked on this coastline. Take me about 5 minutes to get around the entire exterior, and again, it's likely to change more as we get more into the details of this world and making it come to life. So I'm pretty happy though with what the basic look of this island land is so far. And the key to making your coastline look good is to be spontaneous. Don't try too hard to make it look perfect. You've got to kind of let your mind go. I often like to try to think about something else, listen to music while I'm working, so that I don't overthink what I'm doing here. You want to keep it spontaneous. You want to make it something that doesn't look like it was planned out, but that it just happened naturally. So hopefully this is where you're at in your map, and we've got our continent, our island, our land. Our basic first step is done. We are going to jump in our next tutorial into some of the features like mountains and rivers and the details that are really going to start making this thing pop. So thank you for watching. I hope this has been helpful. You can ask questions, shoot me an email, or ask in the comments, and I will try to keep up with them. And hopefully your map is coming along. So I look forward to seeing you in the next video and seeing your maps. So have a good day and happy cartography!